Get everything you know.
Hello everybody, we're here talking about some Path of Exile. GGG recently did their live Q&A session and it was a long one. It went on total for about 2 hours and 5 minutes. They covered multiple topics, and what I've done is I've gone through the whole interview and I've tried to pull out the most interesting information from each section, and we're going to talk about it today. They started off talking about recombinations, so this is something that's hopeful to come in for 0.2, not recombinations as a whole, but the changes we're about to talk about now. Recombination, just so you know, you take two items, you put them together, the mods from each item can then be on the item that comes out of it. It's going to need expedition artifacts as the reward to get this done. However, what they're looking to change, either for 0.2 or in the patch after, is that we will be able to pick which mods we would like with a deterministic outcome, with a chance of success. They mentioned that for 2 mods, this is likely to be a 35% success, and there was sort of quite a lot of laughter, and I don't even try for the 6 mods, but almost impossible for 6 mods. Their aim and ethos with this is to give a freedom of choice and make this accessible for low or mid-level crafting. The expectation is that running an expedition will give you enough artifacts to do a recombination. The downside of this is when we do get the deterministic crafting, if we do fail, those items will be destroyed. So that's going to be one of the new crafting methods coming in. I think it's going to make picking up rares, pushing them together, probably a decent way to farm yourself up some decent low to mid-level gear as you first get into maps. Kind of excited for this one. Not as exciting as some of the other crafting changes they mentioned later, but definitely one of the changes of all time. Features of all time, I suppose. Next up, speaking about the reset. So it was confirmed nothing will be removed from existing characters. A new league will be added with a brand new economy. All the features are going to be added to both the old and new economies. So if you are enjoying playing on your current character, you can continue to play that. You won't lose anything. Everything will be the same, but you won't be able to play with the people that are playing in the new economy as far as trade goes or partying or anything like that. They did specify that they're going to be prioritizing feedback from people playing in the new league on the fresh economies, where people are going to be playing as so the number of balances they've done, that's where it's going to be the fairest start. And another interesting thing that was confirmed during this segment, passive tree has changed significantly and all characters' passives will be reset. So that's good. I would expect that the passive's going to have had to undergone a bit of an overhaul to include a new weapon and all of that. So definitely some big changes going to be coming to passive tree, and no fear for anything you've spent time farming up in this first league. Onto then the Huntress. So this was more of a generic discussion around how the new combo system works and what their ethos is with the skills. So we're going to be incentivized with this class very much, and more so I think with the spear weapon to be playing a hybrid style. This is a melee into ranged into melee style of play. We're going to have skills that combo off of each other. We're going to have skills that when there's effects on the ground, extra things. When there's duration effects around you, have extra effects. And playing the melee skills that put the duration, then playing the range skills that fire through the duration is going to get you the damage, and it's going to be about chaining those skills in the right way. However, it doesn't sound from what they were saying like there's going to be a really complex combo system. It's more going to be a couple of buttons that then augment one another. Then you can do things based on lightning, cold, fire, that sort of general mix and match. The parry system as well, they went into quite a bit of detail about that system during this part of the Q&A. It's going to work similar to block. In other words, you can hold up your buckler, and if something hits your buckler, you parried it. There's going to be a change to block and parry. Well, parry's obviously coming new, but there's going to be a change to block, whereas if you get hit too much for your block, you get heavy stunned. Same with the parry. If you parry too much, you get heavy stunned. So the idea is going to be waiting for those opportunities to fire back with your ability that gets charged up off of your parry to do extra damage. And spears, of course, being the new weapon that's being introduced in this patch, they're going to play heavily into this play style of combos, hitting up close, then leaping back into range so that you can ranged attack, that sort of thing. Does sound like it's going to be quite interesting. This was framed around Huntress, but I think it was definitely more focused on the spear and the buckler and those new weapon types that were coming in as this part of the Q&A. Some balance changes were mentioned during the Huntress section of the Q&A, and that is one, that there will be a lower overall ailment threshold and stun threshold on the character. So we're expecting in the campaign to feel a lot more freeze, a lot more ignites, a lot more shocks, and we're probably going to see that progress through to the maps as well. They also mentioned that there's been a focus on the removal of outliers based on the balance of people playing certain classes more than others. So we are expecting, and this is confirmed in the balance section later in the video, nerfs to shock, nerfs to attribute stacking, or even flat removal of these things. And there's going to be a focus from them on making the ascendancies more generic. So we're not going to see things like spear-specific passives within the ascendancies of trees. We're not going to see things like the Saboteur was specifically mentioned from PoE1 that's quite obviously specking into mines. We're going to see things that the ascendancies can definitely be played across multiple different playstyles. Next up, there was a brief question about support gems, and it was mentioned that with 16 weapon types planned to be added to the game, all of them will be getting unique support gems, and there's going to be over 100 plus support gems added in this 0.2 patch alone. Recommended gems is going to be an ongoing focus of the team over at GGG. They want to make sure that those recommended gems are full and complete, and definitely recommend you some good gems to use. They did mention that there'll be no plans to take into account existing slotted gems for recommendations, so they're likely to be just the things that can get you kickstarted with a skill. Have to use your own knowledge from there. Next up, we dove into the companions and spectres, and although not too much was given away around the spectres, it was informed that monster mods have been balanced to ensure that when players are using them as a summon, that they are going to be effective against monsters. Monsters have a lot more HP than players, so the balance goes damage on the player's side. That's good. Things should work. It was also mentioned that there's probably going to be some really broken stuff we can do there, so spectres could be very, very interesting. On the beast trading and beast collecting side of things for companions, that's not something we're going to be able to trade. That's going to be a, go and find your own. There's going to be no way to do service trading, or once you've tagged them in a map, or once you've seen them in a map, then they're yours. The rower companion is going to be pretty much strictly for ranged. You cannot use melee on the back of it, and it has no inherent bonus to its own movement speed, which I found quite bizarre. I don't really think it sounds to me like it's going to be a gimmick. It really, really does. The main purpose of it seems to be to speed up the character when using ranged. I'm sure there's some builds that might get some bonus out of it, but when you consider that this thing takes up a companion slot, you can only have one companion, you're probably going to want some sort of rare monster if you're doing companion-y stuff, and not the rower. Next up, we are talking uniques, and there's been over 100 uniques added in 0.2, which is absolutely massive. The focus has been on endgame uniques. The Herald unique that's been showcased, the one that gives you all 3 heralds, that's been mentioned specifically as a high div chase item. I personally think that's coming from the corruption maps, but I'm not sure there. They've said that Temporalis has been nerfed. Temporalis has been nerfed slightly, and it would be, quote, less than we'd expect, but the rarity of it has increased by them fixing the no-hit run and nerfing some of the OP builds, so pretty sure we'll find more OP builds there, but specifically ones mentioned in the balancing, as we come to it, are shock, attribute stacking. I think all of these things are going to be gone. Crafting then, significant changes here with 3 to 4 new crafting methods being added. There's going to be more greater essences for a start. There's going to be new map types that have a lot more greater essence in them. They've upped the drop chance of omens. You're going to be getting 1 omen per ritual. Okay, it's not always going to be whittlings and things like that, but there's always going to be one there. There's going to be improvements to runes with more tiers and greater variety. It should be seen that the rune system is kind of like the crafting bench from PoE1. That's how the PoE2 devs are describing it, that it's the way to sort of put that last finishing tweak on your item. There was an importance of no scouring orbs being added, which is slightly upsetting. They want to maintain the value of the drops that are on the floor and picking those up to do the craft. So, okay. Not my favourite, but that's the ethos there. And they went a little bit more into the fracturing orbs too, saying that they are likely to have about a 1 per fracture cluster. So when you see the nexus, if you beeline to the nexus and clear it, you then cleared all of the maps around, your likelihood of getting a fractured orb is probably about 1 in all of those maps. So they're not going to be too rare. You're going to be able to pretty much deterministically farm them. They are going to be quite an important part of some high-end crafting and making bases. Going on from the fracturing orbs, quite a lot more was covered around the difference between corrupted and fractured maps. Corrupted bosses are going to have their own set of unique items, and there's also going to be other things that can happen in the corrupted maps, like corrupted strongboxes and other things which will want to run corrupted maps, certainly for some chase item drops. Cleanse bosses won't have any boss-specific uniques, but they will guarantee the drop of a fractured orb. Pre-fractured items are not going to be a thing in 0.2 on release. They could come later. That's items that drop with one of their suffixes or prefixes fractured in the fractured state. Not going to be a thing to start with, but could be coming soon. Cleansed monsters and fractured maps cannot drop gear, which is really interesting, but they drop more currency and gold to compensate. I would imagine that's going to be huge. That's going to be target farming. Those is going to be massive. Depending, of course, on what the drop table is like for these corrupted boss uniques. We'll have to see, of course. Quite a lot as well covered about the end game. So, bit of a stretch here, but, well, no, not a bit of a stretch, I suppose. 50 plus encounters added. That's counting all of the rogue exiles and things like wisps as unique encounters. The expectation from this is that a lot of these encounters will overlap to make for really unique, really exciting map situations. You know, wisps going into bosses, wisps going into rogue exiles and making things that you can hardly even kill. It's probably going to be some HC deaths that come from that. They're going to be pretty rough. Cleansing corruption and going to the nexuses, that's the new way to progress the Atlas. So it's no longer going to be do 1 tier 1 map, then 2 tier 2 maps, and 3 tier 3 maps. It's no longer going to be that. It's going to be go clear a tier 1 nexus, go clear a tier 2 nexus. It's going to be about exploring the Atlas and about progressing that way. It's going to really reward that exploration. It should start to feel a lot better. There's been multiple unique zones added, included 3 that have been added to water biomes. So getting to water and seeing what's around there should be quite exciting now, rather than just being basic bits of the map. Tier 0 bosses now have 50% less health, going up to tier 4, which have remained unchanged. So it should mean that your entry level into getting those bosses is now much, much earlier. To go on with that as well, all tier bosses can now drop any of the loot, so you can drop diamonds from a tier 0 rather than having to be a tier 4. The drop chance goes up as you go up the tiers. Map bosses are now going to be your guaranteed way to progress the Atlas and get waystones. So when you're running through a tier 5 waystone now, all the waystones that drop will be tier 5. If you want to go up to tier 6, you need to beat a map boss. The map boss will give you the tier 6 waystone. Then you'll run your tier 6 map, and all the waystones that drop will be tier 6, and that will keep going as you progress. And also, for the rogue exiles that have been added, they were confirmed of having a spawn chance at base of 8%, but this can be boosted through some of the Atlas passives. Atlas passive tree has been extended significantly, going from 30 to 40 points with a lot more nodes. Now it seems to be we can specialize a lot more into things like Essence and into things like the rogue exiles. So yeah, should be a lot more customization options available on that tree. Then came balance. This was a bit of a fest, this one. I won't say what sort of fest I thought it was, but heralds no longer self-propagate. Now, heralds, for me, weren't self-propagating anyway. They were propagating each other, but I assume that means they can't propagate each other anymore. That's a bit of a kicker. That was kind of fun. But hopefully there's some new ways to clear screens. I'm sure there will be. There was a quote of this being a nerf fest with all builds changed, and attribute stacking confirmed gone with a nice chuck out the window motion. I would expect anything we have learnt about endgame to have been completely turned on its head. 14 seconds was confirmed, as that should be considered a hard-earned kill time, with 2-second boss timers being something that we really shouldn't be able to achieve. I bet we will. Balancing has been around the 50 to 500k DPS, which is significantly less than what we've got used to. The shock effect scaling has been nerfed. The only buff they spoke about was that crossbows are getting a DPS buff. That's to account for the fact they need to be reloaded. All skill damage has been changed, everything across the board. They didn't go into specifics, but every single skill has been changed. Well, they went into specifics slightly about how Spark keeps scaling, and it shouldn't scale as high because that was a problem in PoE1, so that's obviously been lowered. And that some crossbow skills have been increased. I think armor-piercing rounds they mentioned as specifically being increased. There was a comment about Warrior sort of being considered in that was the class that was not broken. That, to me, that doesn't sound great, because Warrior, to me, felt like the class that was the outlier and broken, because it just didn't have anything in the tank to be able to keep up with any of the other classes, not to any real level. And it was also mentioned that Grim Feast mana stacking for the CI side of things has been nerfed. Now, I imagine Grim Feast will still be quite strong, but it looks like they've looked at the top of the tree and just gone chop, 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 and chopped it down. So we'll have to see what comes out the other side of this. Hopefully the patch notes give us a lot more detail on exactly what builds would even still be viable to League start with, or whether we need to start thinking completely outside the box. Finally then, there was a little bit about the vision of the game going forward, and what they were really talking about was they want the combat to be fun and engaging. You know, they don't want fights to be over in 1.5 seconds. They want you to have to dodge roll. They want you to have to think about your skills. That's not to say that they don't want that ridiculous power to be there. They don't want it to be there from you just combining 3 or 4 skill gems and then everything comes together and you can one-shot the pinnacle boss. They want it to be earned. They want it to be, be something you get to after you've learned how to do the fights properly. That's really how it came across. Power level curves are supposed to be there throughout the game, so as you hit the pinnacle of one piece of content, you're supposed to move on to the next and feel like you're down the bottom again. You're supposed to feel like you're getting stronger, then, oh god, now I need to find another way to conquer this challenge, and so on. I felt like that came across going from sort of maps to sims. It did feel like it had that for me. Maybe that was just a personal thing, but if that ethos continues through the game, that's good. That gives you that sort of that journey to take the character on. They're also saying as well that there's going to be a lot more campaign events to be added. Those areas that we've got massive maps, that is by design. Those areas aren't finished, and there'll be a lot more coming to those zones. Overall, I think the Q&A there was a lot of good information in there. It was reasonably hard to distill it down. There was a lot of back and forth, and I think some of the questions could have been sort of more clearly articulated as exactly what subject we were talking about and that sort of thing. Do the subject a bit more. But yeah, overall, sounds good. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of learning to do, and it sounds like a lot of what we did learn. I'm not going to say it's going to be for naught, because we've learned how all of the different tooltips work and what all of the different words mean and how all of the different calculations happen. But in terms of knowing a build and knowing on day 1 where you're going to look on day 3, that's definitely gone out the window. But anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed my breakdown of what went on the Q&A. It's a fair bit shorter than the 2 hours that was going on for, but still pretty long just to break that down. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. I will be streaming go live of this from when it starts, and then I'm actually off work for the next week, so I'll be streaming pretty much generally Path of Exile 2 for the go live event and for the week after. I hope to see you there. Yeah, have a good one, guys.